Yeah, I guess so.
Because we did the one, we redid it, and then no, this is the fourth thing, because we did the first half again, and then we did the second half. So this will be our fourth try.
Right.
I'm proud of us.
Yeah.
Because we're all handsome men.
We're good. I'm a handsome man.
Got a handsome man rating out there for all you grandparents want to rate us.
My grandma says I'm a handsome man.
My grandma says I'm a handsome man. You ready, Jay?
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you want to put any of that in the video, you can.
Time to snap on that Speedo because you're at the card pull. I'm your host, Stu Galetta.
And I'm Kyle Robertson.
And today we're looking at our final video clip where we are going to go ahead and rank Scars of Mirrodin.
And this is, of course...
That is the
it's
that's the wrong graphic.
Put the old one. I didn't put the one in.
We're going to rank Scars of Mirrodin.
Ranks... I just want to say Mirrodin. Mirrodin. What would be a witty something on that? It's time to remark on the Scars of Mirrodin.
So that's the one you want, right?
Yes. Oh yeah. Time to snap on that Speedo because you're at the card pull. I'm your host, Stu Galetta.
And I'm Kyle Robertson.
And today we are finaling up our set on Mirrodin, and it's time to rank it. Scars of Mirrodin, that is.
Of course, and I'll go ahead and explain a little bit about this here ranking system that we do. We usually take sets from either down at the bottom with a bronze medal up to the silver level, then up to the gold level, and then finally for the tip top that we consider the cream of the crop, we go all the way up to platinum.
Yes,
so
indeed.
that's how we rank those things there.
And what we do is we base this on a little bit. We go and look at the themes and mechanics. We view it from the hidden gems that we've found. We examine the money cards. We talk about the lore, where the story stands. And finally, we see where the initial impact of this has fallen over the turns of time for Magic.
Definitely, but first of all, let's dive on into the themes and mechanics side of Scars of Mirrodin. So I guess I can think of really no better way to start off than with what I believe, at least, and what market research shows to be the best and most popular mechanic of the set: proliferate. Now, let's look at a card like Contagion Engine for a good example of that.
All right,
Stu, what do you think?
I think you're completely wrong, Kyle. But if I had to be honest, you're the opposite. So let's bring up Contagion Engine again and real fast and read it up. So this is an artifact, but the main thing we want to focus on is proliferate and what it does. So for example, you choose the number of permanents that have counters on them, and then you go ahead and you give out another counter to that permanent.
Or players, don't forget.
Or players in this case, which is very strong. So this we see sprinkled out through Scars of Mirrodin all over the place. A whole bunch of creatures have different ways to interact with counters, produce counters, remove counters.
Proliferate. There's so many of them.
There's so many. And if we start to go into how many different counters exist in Magic, we could do a video on that alone right there.
Oh, yeah, really. But the best thing about this is it affects almost all the things out there simultaneously, and you can benefit other players, you can benefit yourself, you can do as many as you want, and you can even benefit players themselves because there are counters like poison and like energy and like experience
Wither
counters
and loyalties.
Yeah, there are things like that
that
you can double. The list is endless for the kinds of things Proliferate does, and it's great because it's one of those mechanics that only gets better with time.
Yeah, we keep getting new types of counters which we're like, ooh, how is this broken? But if you want to know more about that kind of mechanic, we talk about this card actually, Contagion Engine, in one of our Hidden Gems videos. We'll be sure to link it. But
Definitely.
Let's go ahead and we're going to move on to Infect. And we're going to look at a card called Skithiryx, actually, right here. And Kyle,
Old Skittles.
yeah, old Skittles, actually, one of the scariest. So again, stripping away the other stuff and just reading the Infect ability. Kyle, let us hear it.
Alright, well, Infect, to sum it up basically, the creature does damage to creatures in the form of -1/-1 counters, and to players in the form of poison counters. And if you have, as a player, 10 or more poison counters, you just lose the game. So, Infect is probably the most powerful objective mechanic to come out of Scars of Mirrodin, just because it can result in games ending very quickly. And while some players may hate it, some players may love it, it is consistently pretty popular, so there is that at least.
It makes it so every creature that has it is much more impactful than it would have been. Just for like, alright, well, I wouldn't care, I'll take 1 damage. Well, that 1 damage isn't just 1 damage anymore. It's a lot scarier.
Right, it's going to keep adding up until you potentially lose the game. And don't forget, when your creatures block, there's no such thing as chump blocking profitably anymore, because your creatures are just going to get weaker and weaker until they eventually die.
It's a little bit like Wither, but it has much more detrimental effects towards them winning.
Yeah, it was combining the Wither ability and the Poisonous ability into something completely new that was a combination with the best of both worlds. And it's honestly, like, really, really strong, but it doesn't warp the game too terribly much. So I'm mostly okay with it.
Yeah, I'm not. But we dive into this more in our money card section when we actually have to talk about Skithiryx. So if you want to know more about that, we break that mechanic down to a whole nother level.
It can be a little overpowered and unfun sometimes, but having access to an alternate win condition like that in most colors, I'm sort of okay with it.
And being able just to make the game end so you go to the next one, sometimes that's warranted.
It's called for in some cases, for sure.
But moving on to our next one, we're talking about an effect called Metalcraft, and we'll look to a card called Mox Opal.
Yes.
And this one just flat out says the Metalcraft effect. Pretty much, you can't activate whatever ability or on any kind of card, creature, whatever, unless you have 3 or more artifacts to enable it inherently. So it makes it so that some sort of good, awesome, powerful effect is now hindered by having a certain type of permanent on the field. And we see this all across Magic. It was in other sets as well. And, I mean, it was a way to kind of slow down Affinity at the time, if I'm right.
Well, yeah, let's talk about Metalcraft a little bit. I mean, it's not a bad mechanic, but it's also not a great mechanic, because everybody remembers the terror that was Affinity for artifacts that came out of the original Mirrodin, which was an ability that was just so grossly overpowered that a lot of cards got banned, everybody was afraid of it, and it still continues to partially dominate entire formats like Modern. So they created Metalcraft as a sort of watered-down version of Affinity that was fairer, but because it's fairer, that means people don't like it as much. So,
yeah,
whoops.
Kool-Aid has water in it, so if you had a little bit more, it's still kind of like Kool-Aid, so it's kind of the same example as this.
And don't get me wrong, there are great Metalcraft cards, Mox Opal being one of the best ones.
Yeah.
But it just always kind of lives in Affinity's shadow, and therefore most of the cards don't get the recognition or attention they probably should.
Yeah, that's fair. And again, we dive into this a little bit more. That's another money card for us. But moving on to another mechanic that we do see in Scars, Imprint.
Yes, Imprint was actually a returning ability from the original Mirrodin set, and it kind of has a variety of different things it can do. Usually it involves exiling a card from some type of zone and getting some kind of continuous effect from it. Let's look at a card like Semblance Anvil, for example. This one exiles a card from your hand, and spells then that you cast with a card type that shares a type with the exiled card costs 2 colorless mana less to actually cast. This is pretty interesting. Imprint is a really wide open mechanic because it can do a lot of different things at the same time. So it's interesting. There's a lot of design space for this. It's kind of cool. It's one of those mechanics people kind of forget about, but then you see a new card with it every once in a while, and you're like, oh, okay, that's cool. That's actually pretty good.
Yeah, it still has plays today. It's still relevant. Some cards, it's riskier than others. For this one, you lose the card to it, and you never get the card back. Other ones, you can recur them back to the grave.
Like Mimic Vat, for example.
Yeah, Mimic Vat's a great example. We talk about it a little bit more as well, but it is a unique kind of way where it's like, that risk is worth the reward more often than not.
Yeah, and it gives you a way to reuse some of the most powerful cards in your arsenal sometimes, or at least get more mileage out of them than you might have had beforehand. So It's not one of my favorite mechanics of all time, but it's interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, it's not a bad mechanic at that.
Oh, no, not at all.
But now, moving forward to...
Well, we would be remiss, really, if we didn't talk about artifacts.
Yeah,
though, wouldn't
and
we?
that is a key thing right here. And, I mean, the pinnacle of artifacts right here.
Really?
Worm Coil Engine, hands down. This is, again, obviously an artifact. And the good thing about this is that pretty much any deck can use them. In short.
Definitely. And Steel Hellkite is another one of these from my own Hidden Gems segment. But I'll talk a little bit more about this later on, probably. This is not necessarily a great thing that every deck has access to these kind of cards for the health of the game I'm talking about. For the, happiness of the individual player, perhaps. But we'll get to that later on. Mirrodin has always been about artifacts. This Scars of Mirrodin set was no exception. Some of the most powerful cards in the entire set are artifacts, without a doubt.
Well, yeah, artifacts pretty much scarred Mirrodin.
They did indeed. And also, this set brought back some cool recurring elements from the first Mirrodin set, like spell bombs and replicas, where they were both artifacts or artifact creatures that basically sacrificed themselves for some kind of additional effect. So that's just kind of a cool thing to note. Spell-like effects on creatures or, artifacts that are more permanent and can be recurred more easily than instants and sorceries is always a cool thing.
It's more impactful in Commander for certain, so it definitely adds a whole other element to the game for us.
Definitely. So now that we've talked about the mechanics a little bit and themes there, let's move on to some hidden gems.
Let's indeed, actually. And actually, you know what, Kyle? After you.
Well, taking a look at some hidden gems from this set, there's a lot to talk about. And personally, the one that I would really like to bring up is good old Bellowing Tangleworm from the green side of things. The reason I'd like to bring it up is because I think when you talk Mirrodin and even Scars of Mirrodin, a lot of people get hung up on the artifact side of things because, it's Mirrodin. It's all about artifacts. But I wanted to show people that not every good card from the set was an artifact. We have things like, for example, Bellowing Tangleworm or Copperhorn Scout, or there are so many different cards in the set that aren't artifacts, but that are just good cards that really, I think, get overlooked and don't really get their due.
That is totally fair. And actually, for the hidden gem that I'd like to reference, Clone Shell, is the example that, yes, creatures do matter in this effect. Now, mine is a little bit more artifact-centered. I just love this one for how it shows you, they have serviceable creatures that work for any type of deck that has some sort of sub-theme to something else that can cheat stuff into play.
Definitely.
I feel like this card just kind of captured the full flavor of Mirrodin more on the artifact side. I do get your point, though, for the creature aspect.
But it thinks
totally
outside
agree.
the box, though. It's not limited to artifact support.
Yeah, a lot of these cards have so much stuff jam-packed into them. Really using them to their full potential, you have to think about what they can really be used for.
Definitely, and there are cool cards up and down the rarity levels, from commons all the way up to mythics,
Totally.
that still totally get overlooked, and I don't understand why. They're great. Really.
Yeah,
it's a
they're
very
phenomenal.
good set for hidden gems.
And speaking about the money cards, actually...
Let's go on to that.
Yeah, let's go on to that. That's a good segue. But legit, those money cards that we've seen, wow.
Yeah.
Literally, all right, usually in a set where we see the lands being the predominant force, like we saw with the fast lands in our money card session, all the other stuff that was there just kind of flew me away. We talked about Skithrix before. That's above mythic level, man. There's so much on there. It is. They should have either taken some of that off, or made a new rarity type, or made that something. I'm baffled. It is something again before Commander. But just wow.
And there's just great value cards like Wormcoil Engine that are played in many different formats, and from Commander all the way down to competitive Magic like Modern and all that. And they pretty much define the format because they are the top level threats that almost any deck really can play if they really wanted to.
And the price reflects that, because really, we barely dipped below $10. And that's for more than 10 cards if you include all the lands. That's impressive.
Yeah, and the most expensive card we looked at was almost $100. Probably the most expensive money card we've ever looked at in these segments.
So far, at least. So, yeah.
Yeah, really.
So this is definitely a set that's warrant of its price.
And if you buy boosters of Scars of Mirrodin, more than likely you're going to make your money back.
Yeah, you should, hopefully.
Yeah.
But inherently moving on from that to now our next section of the lore. Kyle, you're a little bit more well-versed in this than I am, so would you like to take it away?
Right, yeah. So basically the story involved in Scars of Mirrodin is a lot less convoluted than the original Mirrodin. I'm not even going to go into that whole mess. But suffice to say that we have a trio of planeswalkers, Elspeth, Venser, and Koth, going on an adventure to Mirrodin.
I knew that much at least.
Yeah, to try to investigate what's going wrong with the world. And of course, it turns out that the sort of weirdish things that are going on are connected to Phyrexians showing back up again.
Which were the old school baddies before old school baddie himself, Nicol Bolas, was more or less romping around.
And we thought they had been more or less all annihilated until suddenly they pop up on Mirrodin. And spoiler alert, it has something to do with Karn, but that actually doesn't come into play in Scars
good old
too much.
Planeswalker Karn.
Yep, so it's a bit of a longer story than that, but I'm just boiling it down for you. Very interesting, though. Great way to reintroduce some of the key villains from Magic's history. And on Mirrodin, it totally makes sense that they would be involved here.
Boiled down like an egg, Kyle.
Oh,
Lots
thank
still
you.
There.
And also, I've just to note, Scars of Mirrodin brings back up the basic theme that Mirrodin is the home of artifacts. It's the artifact world, although I'm not sure if now Mirrodin is really the artifact world or is Kaladesh the artifact world. I don't know.
That's a fair call, because Kaladesh, we did see some awesome flavor of new mechanics and refreshed paint on artifacts that weren't severely overpowered.
Yeah, they were trying to depower it a little bit and really like blend the non-artifact and artifact cards, because it's true, in Scars of Mirrodin, I think we still see a little bit of a disconnect between the non-artifact and artifact cards where they synergize with themselves, but not with each other. Kaladesh, they made a big point of things that aren't artifacts synergize with artifacts and vice versa.
Kyle, if they weren't power cards, then why did they give them energy?
True, but it's interesting. I like to make that comparison, although it's kind of debatable whether Kaladesh made artifacts any less broken than they were, but whatever.
They have their plays. The same thing as Mirrodin at the time had their plays. These are a lot more in check, and I think Wizards did a good job with Kaladesh versus... I mean, this one also as well. They definitely toned it down since OG Mirrodin kicked
definitely.
in. So it's commendable with what we've seen from all this other stuff.
So what do you all think out there? Did Kaladesh or did Mirrodin do Artifact better? Interested to see what everyone thinks.
Yeah, check it out in the poll. We'll definitely see what the results will be. But now moving on to the impact. And legit, I think this set overall was very impactful. If a creator were to hit, that kind of impact, honestly, because, well, I guess it depends on the size, actually. That's not really saying much at all. But literally, it left a mark on the game, hence the name Scars of Mirrodin, because after Mirrodin came out, they know that they've done something, and it totally scarred the game for what it really was. And this is more or less them realizing their mistake and what should have been done. And from this, we've seen these cards printed over and over again, played over and over again, talked about over and over again. And, like, I mean, we have one of the swords in there. Those are the scariest equipments you pretty much have in the game.
Yeah, and they decided, oh, let's make more of them because that's a good idea. Okay, but you do see some even reprints from the original Mirrodin, like Trinket Mage, for example. There are some very deliberate callbacks to those, and they were trying to be a little less broken with things this time around, but let's look at Wormcoil Engine. You tell me, did they succeed? I don't know. That's really debatable.
Well, yeah, but also with the way they use the mechanics, I thought the mechanics overall were fairly well done. You
definitely.
see them all throughout Magic now that we still use, so they're not bad. Like, you see some mechanics like we've seen before from Shadowmoor, in which you, what was it, Clash? Like, that was barely relevant to see coming back again or utilized with something. This is stuff that you see sprinkled throughout Magic as it's come, or has actions with other things, so it's pretty big.
And Proliferate had nothing to do with artifacts, really, but was just one of the coolest overall mechanics ever made, in my opinion. Like, it's just so nice, and it gets better the longer the game progresses, so how can you go wrong with something like that? It was just really a wonderful idea to design something like that.
Yeah, it's definitely got a snowball effect. It keeps moving forward with what it's got.
Absolutely. I mean, when it comes to cards defining multiple formats, Scars of Mirrodin has them in spades, and there are also plenty of things left over for the casual crowd, too. We saw a lot of them in our Hidden Gems. They're things that don't get as much attention, but they're great. They really are.
I gotta say, I think it has it in hearts because that's where it lives in all of ours.
Oh, well, yeah, of course. But it's got everything. It's got something for everyone. And I was honestly really impressed by the quality of cards in this set. I really was.
Me too, actually. So moving on to us to actually go ahead and rank it. Kyle, I'll have you start it. So where does this lie? Bronze,
right.
silver, gold, platinum? Platinum? Is it platinum? Tell me, is it platinum?
No. It really kind of breaks my heart to have to go this way, but I'm going to give Scars of Mirrodin a gold.
Could you act more heartbroken? Because that was
Just-
very soft. I'm very
All right,
heartbroken.
fine.
I'm Kyle Robertson, and I'm very heartbroken right now.
I'm just short of a platinum, and I'll tell you why. I'm giving this set a gold because I think from a game design standpoint, returning to Mirrodin was a bit of a mistake. I'm sorry, I know it's probably not a popular opinion, but I just think that with the whole Affinity debacle, they should have rethought visiting a plane about artifacts, and they kind of did, like I said, with Kaladesh. They tried to make it the whole thing a little less broken and more blended with other types of cards, but I feel like they went back to Mirrodin because they were trying to, as you said, correct some of the mistakes they did the first time around. I feel like most of the time they just ended up making more mistakes and new ones this time. So, I don't know. I mean, I'm probably getting like way over involved in this and way up into my own head about this, but I just needed to say that. I felt like it needed to be said. That said, though, as I said just a few minutes ago, great set. There are great gems, great money cards. Story's pretty fun. Impact on Magic as a whole is very tangible, so I gotta at least give this a gold. I mean, it'd be silly not to.
Well, I'm not going to tell you you're wrong, Kyle, but you're not right. I think it's a platinum. 100% I think
I mean,
it's a
I understand
platinum.
why you say that. I just have some issues with this set.
Well, a couple reasons why is initially the hidden gems going through this, I had enough hidden gems to make at least 3 videos worth of content from this, and that's like
I did too.
with total like I was amazed. There's so many cards like I want to talk about this, but this one's way higher on my list, and I gotta talk about this. But I feel like people know this one, but I really want to bring this one up. And honestly, I would love to do another set review of this one as well. We can make it a little bit more of a different style, but there's so much good stuff hidden in here. The money cards, obviously, people know about them and they know why they're worth that much. And again, like we said with the price, it proves it right there. Also, the lore, we're getting back into potential of where we could see Phyrexians coming back into the story again. So the touch of this set really has propelled it throughout Magic. It's part of its own lifeline to be like, this is what we are. Everyone who's ever played Magic at one point and stopped is like, yeah, I used to have an Infinity deck back in the day. Everyone seemed to have an Affinity deck back in the day. So people who don't even play anymore, they're like, oh, you play? I used to have this. Like, everyone who I ever ran into that used to play had an Affinity deck, and that just speaks something to what they did. Yes, coming back and touching on this set might have been a bad idea, but it's like an argument, you know? If you lose it, you kind of want to come back and be like, well, I'm not completely losing this, I'm not 100% winning it.
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of like what I felt they did, but even still, it's... I really liked it. I really liked it, and again, for the reasons where it's like artifacts can go into any deck, that's not always a bad thing. Soul Ring is a card that's in any deck. It's your choice. You don't want to use it.
But Soul Ring, that's the thing. Like, just because everybody uses it doesn't mean it's like inherently unfair and probably shouldn't exist in the game. But things like Wormcoil Engine, I just wonder how that got past best practices. I don't know. I mean,
it was a different day back then, honestly. Like, again, for us Commander players, we get to revel in the riches of past mistakes because anything that was routed to all players back then or anything else like that, like we saw with Exsanguinate, which is one of your hidden gems, it's only helped us out as the game's progressed on and on. So there's so much value. There's really so much value. Like, you really can't neglect it. And Platinum is where it deserves to be.
Well, we'll agree to disagree on that, but I have to give it a pretty high rating because it was a great set, and I very much enjoyed talking about it.
I'm going to have to come back here again so we can revisit this.
Oh, I'm sure we will. The story will call for it at some point, so...
Oh. Alright, well anyway, that is going to conclude this set as its whole and this video for us as well. But if you like the cards that we had in our pool today, be sure to let us know which ones you liked, and also let us know where this set would rank for you on your totem pole. Did we give it justice? Is Kyle wrong?
Well,
so be
conversely, is Stu wrong? I mean, it could go both ways.
Let's just see who's more Yeah, right, I guess.
Well, you can let us know either in the comments down below, or you can reach out to us on our social media platforms, Reddit, Twitter, and Facebook, all at the handle MTG The Card Pool. So, until next time, I guess I'm Kyle Robertson.
And until next time, I'm definitely Stuart Coletta, and I will talk to you guys next time, because we are here
At the Card Pool.